Moving on to our last case for tonight. Let's get 2 minutes on the clock and your time starts now. All right, 2 minutes is up and let's move to the answers. So here, as is all things with workers' comp claims, there's always a bit of information that seems a little bit odd. And for example, here we have a marketing executive that's been moving things around a workshop. So you'd be wanting to clarify the events surrounding the injury itself or clarifying the mechanism of the injury. Now, with this as well, to get an idea of how much functional impact this is having on the patient, things like severity of the pain become particularly important to note, especially when it's not provided in the STEM here. Now, we do know it is having an impact, but you would want that numerical grading to be able to track those changes over time. You'd also be wanting to know what kind of treatment has been taken or what kind of things they've tried since the injury as well, and tied into that would be the response to that, but I probably wouldn't be mentioning that down as a specific answer. Again, just trying to diversify the responses we're giving. You would then want more information around the effects of the injury on their capacity to complete their specific work, and to make that clarified as well, you'd probably want a summary of their role and responsibilities to work out exactly what their work does entail, and you would then be checking, does that report on the effects of their injury and incapacity to complete work match what their work actually entails. Now, tied to that as well, you'd also want a history of any previous injuries, both to that same location, but also previous injuries at all. This is something that's strongly recommended from WorkSafe, and probably the best source to find these kinds of answers here. Have a flick through the WorkSafe, in my case, WorkSafe Victoria website, and they have sections on completing medical reports for doctors, which will step you through a lot of these processes and what kind of questions you should be asking. This is something that I think we step into not infrequently, unfortunately, in general practice, but some of us, if we haven't had the time to actually read through what is expected and what is best practice, it's an easy one to kind of gloss over and miss. So I strongly recommend that. All right, let's move on though to the next question. We'll put 2 minutes on the clock and your time starts now. All right, time is up and let's get to the answers. So, every now and then you're going to come across answers like this or questions like this where there's going to be overlap between the answers, and unfortunately, it's just something that can't really be teased apart too well. So, the first thing I would say here is lumbar disc herniation. And you'll see that kind of leads to lumbar radiculopathy or left-sided sciatica. There is going to be interplay between those things, but you can have those other things without lumbar disc herniation as well. So that's why I think you could easily get away with those being separate answers here. So left-sided sciatica, given the description of the pain shooting down the leg, would also definitely be on that list. If you were to just put sciatica, you'd be probably getting a half mark or losing marks there. Again, it's all about being specific and concise. We want to specify exactly which side is involved here. Just like if you're putting on a radiology form, you'd be wanting to specify the sides so they know where to be looking. Now, lumbar radiculopathy is certainly going to be in there as well. Again, you would probably get more points if we're going to be specifying sides here. And, of course, your more generic musculoskeletal lumbar sprain or strain would definitely also be considered there. And remember, musculoskeletal injuries with the swelling of the muscles can be putting pressure on nerves as well, and so can actually present with radiculopathy, or probably more concerning here would be myopathy. Now, there's no evidence of subtle paresthesia or mention of things like incontinence, and so that would usually veer you away from things like cauda equina, something you would keep in the back of your mind. But take note, the question here specifies what is the most likely differential diagnosis for those presenting symptoms. And so without those more red flag items, you would probably want to be putting the more common things first. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, coming up then to the next question. Let's get 2 minutes on the clock and your time starts now. All right, time is up and let's get to the answers. Now, multiple choice questions in the KFP exam will often have more correct answers than there are options. So if you're ever kind of really stuck trying to tease between different answers, rest assured you're probably still going to get marks. I think the thing that they sometimes do that does make it worthwhile is that there'll be one or two options that are the kind of make or break things that you would definitely have to have as an answer in there. For something like this, I would look at radiology imaging pathways. There's Radiology Without Borders, used to be WA Imaging Pathways, now Radiology Without Borders. If you haven't checked that out, oh my goodness, it is fantastic. It has evidence-based guidelines for what kind of imaging to do under different circumstances, with a breakdown by body areas as well as conditions as well. So looking through their pathways here, really you would be wanting to get an MRI of the lumbar spine, given you have the radiculopathy and myopathy there as well. Tied into that is you would definitely be worth getting nerve conduction studies and electromyography, given the loss of power. You would also be worthwhile getting an occupational therapy assessment to look at what modifications could be made to the workplace to facilitate that return to work, and a functional capacity evaluation to see within the confines of that work environment or that role that they're fulfilling, what kind of things can they do there. So even if they can't fulfill their usual duties, is there other things that they could be moved to? And that would again be tied into an occupational therapy assessment, but is its own separate distinct thing. Now, other things that you would maybe consider would be things like a consultation with a neurologist, but these are the more kind of diagnostic things here to further evaluate her condition. If they're asking for kind of long-term management, then definitely a neurologist would come into play. Assessment by a vocational expert would probably not be as worthwhile. A vocational expert would be an expert in their particular role, but I think would not have much of a role in terms of determining their particular capacity to fill that role at that time. Again, I'd probably say you're going to get more marks and more reward by sticking with the OT and the functional capacity evaluations there. Now, bone scan of the lumbar spine may be beneficial later on if we're thinking there's been fractures there and we want to follow up any healing kind of things. Evaluation by an orthopaedic surgeon, probably not indicated at this point of time. And again, these are the most diagnostic to support the claim and further evaluate her condition, although down the line we probably are going to be heading that way. And review by a pain management specialist, I think that again there's not really as much there to support the need for that at this particular point in time, but again would probably be an option for down the line. All right, so that is the end of the questions tonight. Hopefully you've done well. Hopefully you've learnt a lot. Hopefully it's just been revision for you. But I want you to think through the way you're answering these questions, and we'll keep cracking on.